So, hello, Lisa Starr. So great to be with you here again for the third time in a row. We're keeping it up,
That's right. That's right.
keeping it
It
up.
feels easy too because you are fun.
Great. Likewise. So, for our new listeners, Lisa Starr, you have been I would call you a natural time. You're a natural time expert, surfing the waves of Jose Arguilles's dream spell calendar, 13 moon calendar for 25 years. Grew up in the tradition of Mayan astrology in your own home, learning from your mother as a rebellious teenager. And and I'm really, really glad to be sharing the space with you and this learning, teaching with you on the 13 moons as we are riding our way through the 13 moon year, meeting up each month to share our wisdom and our perspective and give some practical tips for our listeners that enjoy and want to learn to practice the 13 moon calendar as a way of observing life and what we this thing we call time. So it's a real pleasure to sit here with you. And I've been listening to your podcast recently and during the lunar moon, and definitely sharing the lunar vibes with you, the very profound challenges that this previous month has led us to experience and to meet. So, if you can maybe remind us just a bit about the lunar moon and how what we kind of maybe a short energetic recap of what's this movement that we experience through the lunar moon and how it connects with the electric moon.
Right. It's my lived experience as we just begin a new moon to really feel saturated with the last one. It's harder to predict what's coming than to be an expert on what just happened. And that's what's so beautiful about committing to paying attention to the 13 moon year is that you become an expert on each tone as it passes. And I don't like being predictive generally. I mean, I'm a psychic or a clairvoyant in life as well, and I'm always like, I don't want to future tell because we just can't know the nuance. Like that's pretty egotistical, but you can become more expert or experienced in the tone so that you kind of you have a memory and you have, your guard up a little about some of the energies we move through, or you have some excitement because you remember positive experiences that I think are on the continuum. So that said, I always feel sort of sad when it's a new natural time year starting on July 26th because I know it's going to be some work, just like to start a new cycle of karma essentially and feel purpose coming in, but also really upfront noticing this is the challenge of your life, Lisa, or the way that you are going to be asked to grow and broaden and be receptive to change. And so you can be like, that's cool, that's great. I love change because I do. I'm a blue storm. I'm all about change. But then when it comes, it can't be in a small container. It has to be exactly karma sized for a whole year to unfurl. And so true to that, I think the lunar moon for most of us, I'm always interested in finding out other people's perspectives, yours, but the lunar moon is polarized, meaning like the shadow and light that we see on the moon's surface. You're going to have like your light-filled part of the lunar moon and then the darkness. And sometimes I think people start in darkness and move to light, and other times I started in light and moved into total pitch darkness. And then maybe it's not that austere. It can be like undulating, like that's hard, that's not, that's easy, that's impossible. So I just do sort of recognize that people are pretty strung out at the end, just like, okay, yes, challenge. You didn't usually if you follow this calendar, you don't get to sidestep any of the stages. Doesn't have to be the most extreme hard lunar moon ever, but if it was, or it feels that way, I just think because time, the continuum we're in, has some real impossibilities for the human species. Not impossible, but hard. So, I mean, it makes sense if we have pointed times of challenge that feel overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah. I love listening to the way you describe it. So definitely, it's been a very challenging month in my experience as well. And objectively, just observing, the people I guide and coach, and the people around me, and being very sensitive and clairvoyant myself, I can really identify the people's experience without them having to say anything or explain, and I could really see um, on people's faces this phase of the year. And of course, for me, with the perspective of 13 moon calendar, so I can directly identify it as the lunar month. But for people that don't have this tool in their lives, so they just think life sucks right now more than it sucks usually,
Yeah.
or it's things are trying, life is making it hard for them. Um, but so I can say luckily and thankfully, we do have this calendar to help us see a different perspective on how the energy is flowing in this world and through us and around us. And from the very challenging lunar moon, we're we're surfing into the electric moon, which is already from 2 to 3. So the symbolics of from 2 to 3 are very symbolic, and we'll dive deeper into that. And also, I'd like to say a few words for our listeners about the electric moon from my perspective and experience. So Jose Arguelles, he bonded these keywords to each one of the lunar tones, which the Mayans, I assume, had a way of identifying them in their own language. It must have been a different context because of a different reality and society they were living in. But I can really feel in my guts and my heart from the moment I was first exposed to the way Jose Arguelles um, identified these energies using English words that I can really relate to them very, very simply and clearly. Like I can really feel these qualities in my life, in my body, in the way I observe my motion in this life, and the electric tone is directly connected with the concept of service, which is something that always has really been pulling me or attracting me because I always being in service is it's pretty much the highest quality of life in my perspective a human being can reach, because it means that I'm in giving, and when I'm giving, it means I have something to give, and it means I'm acting from a broader place than just the selfless need to fulfill my own needs, but it also gives me the satisfaction of giving to others. So it's a very interesting connection that he's made between the electric tone and the essence of service. And I'd like to be happy to hear your perspective, how you see the connection between these two, between this idea of electricity, this existing thing that it's almost hard to grasp, but it's everywhere. Everything is electricity. Every bit of energy works as electricity. So how do you see this connection between the electric and the service?
Well, I mean, in the language, like we call the electricity that we receive from the power company like our service, right? So there's just some interesting linguistic play, which I think Jose excelled at. He was a blue monkey, so he was very playful. Um, I guess where I want to begin at a tiny moment is just the suspension of disbelief around how non-indigenous some of this language is, right? Like I was thinking about how the Maya used for the moons, they used animals. So like the magnetic, what we call magnetic was the bat, and lunar was the scorpion. I honestly would have to look at my notes to see what electric is, so stay tuned. But just like it was obviously simplified in that way, and they had associations with these animals that spoke to, you know, this animal could encompass everything they wanted represented by these tones. So all I think that Jose did that I find also very natural to follow, like not too weird or incomprehensible, is just to choose terms from our own modern lives. And it's funny because like electricity seems really archaic, like something that came back in the early 1900s, but now everything is electrified in terms of the digital technology. And so, all that said, I guess I'm sort of speechifying around this, but it's just like for me, it's very simple. Actually, after I get through these layers, it's just that electricity is given to us somehow by the great power source of life, which would be the sun. And so electricity and the way we create light and heat in our homes is how we humans have found a way to bring the sun somewhat artificially into our everyday eternal existence. And so if you feel that the electricity is somehow connected to divinity, then you get electrified in the electric tone and the electric moon. You get juiced up, you get connected to the source. You are getting powered by a supreme being, creator, the higher power. And that's the first part of it is that you receive, like a solar battery. And then the whole function of having that power is to help others. And we can talk more about what is helping others because it's not as specific as just every act is charitable. It's broader than that. But that's like I think what I would want to say. I said a lot of words, but that's what I feel.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you. I can relate to what you're how you're seeing it, and I like to speak about the tone of service as this place where we're connected with our own inner source of natural energy, like the sun that shines within us. That whenever we're able to connect within ourselves to this essence of service, of like the sun serves us, so we serve the world.
Mhm.
I I straight away can feel how I don't need to make any effort at all to be in action from this place of service within me. It's the most natural place within me to just be and exist in the world when I'm able to align with myself, with my purpose, with my full strength. And so I find a lot of excitement in service and being connected. And this excitement, it relates to me like electricity. Electricity, if we're looking at from the lunar to the electric tone, so I like to describe that the lunar tone is the polarities, it's the plus and the minus. And then the electric is the electricity, it's this bondage that is naturally flowing between any two polarities. So it's this kind of essence that drives us to face our challenges. It's like this essence that wakes us up in the morning, even when we're at our lowest, and it says, "Come on, you have something to live for. Like you have something to get up for. You have some kind of responsibility of bringing something to this life, and you can't just give up on that because you just can't as a human being. We won't let you disconnect from this source that's giving you all the time. So you also need to be giving to find the way. It doesn't have to be a professional service or something, a defined kind of service at this point. It could just be, loving our children, loving our pets, loving the earth, being in interactions with our neighbors, with our friends, with our family members. It really doesn't matter. It's just about bonding, which
Yeah.
is also a word Jose gave the electric tone, uh, that the action is bonding.
Yes. Well, I think that another way to kind of envision it is with water in your home. That, of course, water is piped into most of our homes, but we don't know it until we turn the spigot on. So, like in ourselves, when we're in the electric tone, we can either focus on it, and it changes over 28 days. We focus on, like, I need to connect to source. I need to be electrified. I'm depleted. I am lost. I need to hook back into that power source so that I am juiced up. And that's, I kind of find myself there here at the beginning. But the other thing is to just try to help someone. And then because we turned that spigot on, we realized that the water was there the whole time. So we kind of approach it either way, which is a good transition from the lunar moon to be like, either I need to go help someone right now consciously, or I need help right now. I need it to come from others or straight from a meditative way of pondering and connecting to spirit.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of so this moon, from my understanding, it's inviting us to be active, to start seeing that we have this journey ahead of us to complete this year, and we're quite at the beginning, even though we've been severely injured during the lunar moon, and now we have to pick ourselves up. And exactly because we need to pick ourselves up, this is the point where we spiritually look up and say, Creator, divine force that put me here, please help me. Give me the power to deal with all these challenges that I'm facing. And then, as magic works, when we ask for something, we actually get it, and in its most simple form. And so when we ask to be energized, so we will get the experiences that will help us to be energized. And so we're driven by this energy that's pushing us, and then we start dealing with the challenges, and we start getting excited that things are moving, that it's not staying the same challenges that we met in the previous moon. Now we're dealing with it, it's moving. So for me, it's always very much, the electric tone is very connected with passion,
Mm.
and with this passion of life, and at the same time, like this dealing, facing challenges. If the lunar tone is really about meeting these challenges face to face, being confronted by these challenges, so the electric tone is about really finding this inner strength to really face these challenges and start dealing with them, and set the motion of the year into movement actively.
Well, I feel like you're expressing what we referenced last episode, where you have a lot of like masculine solar um, perspective. Because I'm all right, sounds good, Ellen. I'm gonna just like hang here and try to heal. And, that's just an example, like to the viewer, like who knows what kind of lunar moon you went through. We're trying to be very helpful to you, because we make these journeys alone. This is a very isolated practice, and the internet helps, but you're somewhere and you might have really had a lunar moon that felt injurious or annihilating. And I mean that mostly like on an energetic level or mood wise, just feeling inundated by challenge and sacrifice, things that are designed to break the human ego, which every one of us needs cyclically to do. But that said, I don't have like a positive aspiration at the moment. My picture of where the electric tone sometimes, and particularly over 28 days in our year, it's like a slow awakening, an instant realization that I need divine assistance. And that can always come through humans who are acting divine. But an instant realization that, okay, the time of assessment about what I'm going through that's difficult is complete. The lesson is learned. Now it is time to activate. It's time to activate a strengthening exercise that makes me feel like I can go on. I mean, that sounds very extreme, but that's the gist of it. I can go on. I can go
Yeah,
on. There's something,
I
there is a
like that.
source that's going to help me, but I don't know. I mean, that's all. Just for me, it's more of a slow melt.
That's beautiful. I love it that you made this distinction between the masculine solar energy and where how you're relating to it, because I this is exactly the polarities we speak about when we're observing life through the perspective of natural time. So we're giving space for the solar perspective, and we're giving space to the lunar perspective, and we see how they're working together to create reality as we experience it all the time, this masculine, feminine, giving, receiving,
Yeah.
full, empty, all this movement. And and I love that you can, aside my perspective, give that perspective for people that are listening to us to really understand that, just like you said, there's no correct way to do anything. There's just the most correct way to do something is the way that we're most present and able to really feel that we're connected to what's going through us and what we're doing. And that's also quite a solar masculine way to portray it, as very bright kind of clarity. But
Right.
I can definitely, inside my own experience, identify very much with how you're describing your experience and really see that on the one hand there is this driving force that's a bit stronger, and perhaps also because I'm directly connected with the electric tone through my connection to the ancient Mayan Tzolkin, in which I am a three seed or a electric seed, and both the seed and the electric together, it's a very sparked up energy. It's like one that likes to get excited very much because it activates my surroundings, and it's also a way for me to activate myself. It's like to give myself this zap of excitement on what's happening in this moment, being very grateful about it, and being very so
Well, that's
at the
and
same.
that's an electric spark, right? Like that fits in perfectly with someone turning the lights on in our lives as if the electric moon and tone were that simple. I believe that to be true. I'll frame it one other way, which is because I have consciousness about the wave spells and how you can get really tapped out or feel unmotivated after lunar times of challenge is just like it is a perfect time to ask for help. It is a perfect time to seek help. It's perfect.
It
It,
is.
it's as if we have to have a bit of an isolated journey at the front end. Everyone's navigating their own, karmic purpose and they're busy. Like, what? Okay. And it can be very individuated, just like if you look at the Mayan numerology, it's all about dots and bars. So the first tone or moon, the magnetic one, is like tight little one dot or a stone. And it's like a whole nucleus of our individuality and what's going to play out. And then when we split into the two dots of the lunar tone, the second tone, I always feel that it is a splitting. It's not an adding. So within our tight purpose, there was the challenge and we can see it now. And then I feel opposite that when it's the electric tone and we're in three dots, the continuum, the ellipsis, it's like drops from the sky, that where we feel separation and disconnection and maybe adversity, well, that third dot is coming right in between, as you described, to bond and to soothe where there's alienation and separation or hatred or something
Mm.
much more subtle. I'm like the metaphor queen. It's kind of like couples therapy. Like when you fall in love, everything is unified and holistic. And then you realize, you're two individuals and you might have severe um, conflict in ideas or ideals. So then you get a marriage counselor that comes and tries to fuse you back together into a place of some kind of evenness. And so does that help anyone? Plenty of people experience relational,
That's beautiful.
like your intimate relations might be exposed after a lunar moon. And so we want to imagine that divinity or actors on behalf of divinity, in terms of healers and seers and clinicians, can be there to help us along.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. That's a really beautiful way of bringing it from the inner emotional aspect of riding through these waves, that it's really this. I love it so much. I love it so much. It's like this really clear possibility when connecting with this energy to realize that in every point we reach our edges, our limits, there is this possibility in this world to be a part of something bigger and to reach out to another person or another force of nature. And feel connection and that it's not an individual journey. And I think in many ways, when I was listening to you, it's like the electric tone, it's really connected to divine intervention.
Yeah.
It's really this kind of, there's a bigger force working all the time, and we just need to tap into it, and it gives us energy, like tapping, like plugging our computer into the socket. And and we have really the possibility when we're surfing the 13 moons to consciously practice seeing this connection unfold during the electric moon and really seeing where we can ask for help and connect with people that can help us, and where we're being connected to, and people are connecting with us, and purposes are connecting with us. And it really gives this feeling of wow, like I'm in a movement now. I'm not dealing with my own kind of duality, polarity shit. Wake up in the morning, it's got to get myself up to deal with life, and then deal with life. And then the day, it's like, wow, that was a full day of dealing with life. Now I need to process it. And it suddenly, there's this spark of life that reappears during the electric moon. And I think it's such a beautiful, profound gift that this wisdom gives us to live with, because it gives us a really harmonic and smooth framework to spiritually and emotionally and consciously evolve by just putting our attention to something, knowing that there's some other hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people in the world that are doing pretty much the same thing at the same time. So I'm not all alone in this, and there is a foundation holding the wisdom, and people are joining in because they're finding also lots of blessings and joy in living with this calendar. So Jose as well had a electric uh, aspect to him through his occult power, through the electric dog. So he had this kind of aside being a monkey and the master of illusion, he had this devotional heart of kind of giving his life to give this to humanity as a service. And I think this is one of the qualities about him that I more related to.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely did. I I I feel like I'm emphasizing this transition from lunar to electric, but if you kind of step back and like, okay, we've made the transition, or just speak to it like everyone can feel much more bonded and together and interested in each other when we have in our individual paths been extremely challenged, right? So that would be where I think the ego death of a really hard lunar moon for any of us means that we're pretty raw and open and more receptive to doing something with others because our individual egoic intent has maybe been torn away. So that's part of the transition, I think, into being more available to see what someone else needs, because we're not just going to, I was speaking about like, well, I feel like I need some help, but I'm also not too busy with my own stuff to not stop and say, oh, I'll help you. I'll help you. So it's kind of just like it upends the like, here's my purpose. I'm going to go and do this. Like that would be a very Western, modern, capitalist, whatever we want to call post-industrial place in society is that we start new cycles with fierce intent and we're going to be dogged and we're going to get to our goal. And this path is not that, which is why I think we're drawn to it because it says, of course, there are new beginnings. Let me see how it unfurls. And I'm much more willing to be a passenger. And it's hard to be a passenger when it still feels like human ego shattering, like I was on the wave that was like taking me to spiritual heights and teaching me new insight. I wasn't on the wave where everything crashes and burns. But the cool thing about moving from lunar to electric, everybody, is that I think there are just a couple of moons that are really designed to focus on challenge One of them is the lunar moon. And I think we revisit it to a much lesser degree, but we revisit it in the planetary moon. And that's true of every 13-day wave spell as well. Like lunar is designed to show us challenge. And then we don't have to, it doesn't have to be that way. But we don't get to decide exactly how that shifts. But here we are, just hoping, like really, I'm sure receptive. Please help me. And oh, I understand that people need help because I need help, so I'll be more helpful. Like it just feels that simple to me. And I go on these little rants that aren't meant to single out people who have addiction struggles, like actively, whether we call it drugs and alcohol or food or love. I mean, people in modern society are pretty addictive. They're pretty grasping. They have a lot of sense of emptiness, a hole within that might have been filled with more direct contact with nature and the spiritual world previously. So people are pretty addictive. Like, look at internet usage. So I don't feel like I'm just speaking to drug addicts in recovery, but the principles of recovery seem also pretty sound and similar, which is just like you might think you're on your own and then everything falls apart. And the solution is to be with other people that have fallen apart and see if you can help those who are suffering. In doing that, you suddenly aren't wrapped up in your own and you get distance, which is I think a big part of the electric tone. You just get distance from that self and other or self and challenge, and you just get distance that feels more divine. And then you're regulating your synapses or calming down or however we would describe that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Beautifully described. And really, I can identify with that. And it's even just to listen to, and imagine myself going through this kind of process during this moon. It gives me a lot of, it calms my nervous system just to imagine myself, reaching out to get help, reaching out to help people that need help in any form possible. And just to put a month on having consciousness aware of this possibility, it definitely makes a difference for any person that chooses to observe what they're going through this perspective. And what what kind of challenges could the or confrontations could the electric moon bring us for us to, let's say, for example, be able to reach out, or or if reaching out might be a challenge for itself? Like, how do you see the, let's say, the shadow side of the electric moon?
That's interesting. I tend to feel like the electric moon is one of the pretty pure tones, like that. I mean, I'll be interested because I have to kind of live through them sometimes. Like I say, they're very fresh when you complete them. You're like, I know what this is about. And an electric moon playing out in my life right now, I'll have to get a refresher. But I just think the question of the moon is how can I best be of service? And I don't think there's a lot of downside there. Like, so it's an elevated moment and we need one. Like we've been sunk into our own unconscious or the survival instinct of the human species on planet Earth in the moon of challenge. And then there's just this invitation to get a break from that. So I think it's pretty like faultless or flawless. However, I think there's a lot of exploratory work that you want to be awake for. Like you can kind of surf through it at a depth or, on a more superficial level. So you can say, I'm going to be more giving. That feels more superficial to me, even though it's wonderful. But the other thing is to look into the question, how can I best be of service? That's a conversation between you and your sense of divinity. And the 28 days are the answer. We open with the question and then we're shown the answer. So the difficulty could be like, I had no idea that was how I was supposed to be of service.
Mm,
I'll give an example. Like I am a blue storm. Acrimony and confrontation is something that I invite because I'm just too strong for my human body. And I don't mean that arrogantly. It's just like I don't fit. So I'm always outsized and people get disrupted. And I don't even know why or how I'm responsible. And I may not be because Blue Storm is trying to bring clarity in other people's lives and they might need a big rinse. That said, I when I encounter struggles like that, I don't like to think like, I need to pray for them. I need to pray for their wellness. Like that feels odious to me because I am being like defensive and I feel judged and I want to get away. But the electric tone this moon dropped in and I was like told directly and I felt it instinctually as truth. I just have to wish for them to feel really wonderful or for the best. Let's see. The phrase that I mean this as like this could be your act of service or this mantra, like I wish for others who I have been pulled apart from. I wish for them to get what they deserve. Sounds really great for those of us who are angry because they're like, I hope they get what they deserve. But it immediately, under the like guidance of the divinity that exists in the electric moon, shifts to, I just hope they get what they deserve because clearly they're operating from a sense of loss or depletion, violation. I just hope they get what they really need. I
Mhm.
hope they get that because
Mm.
that would diffuse their, I guess we could say, conflict with me. So it sort of is just, to me, that's like work for me, but it was work I was given as part of this electric moment and it feels like okay, it's work I can do.
That's awesome. That's really good. That's a really good practical way of practicing being in service between me and myself to just use the opportunity of knowing that there's a divine force that's come to activate us and help us and of help us step into our what into our power so we can journey through this year with and experience what we need and be synchronized best we can with our natural movement and so be of the best service to our environment to just use it as a perspective of looking at people where I feel pain, where I feel grief, where I feel loss, where I feel suffer. And then it usually from my white mirror perspective, so everything is a reflection of my inside. Every single interaction, every single thing I hear, if it touches me, it means it's reflecting something within me. So it's never about the other person in front of me. It's always about what it confronts me with inside of me, what it reflects to me. So if I take what you're saying practically, so I can, whenever comes up something, here in the Middle East, we're experiencing war, ongoing war for years now, and it's so human and natural and easy from the place of pain and suffering and being attacked to automatically turn the flip the coin and look at the other side with all the pain I have and wish that they disappeared from the face of the earth and this whole thing that made this pain show up for me would just be wiped out and so many humans and people around are dealing this way and processing this way because it is such a hard um, thing to bear as a human being, war and all of this violence and horrible things. So even if I look at it from this perspective and I see this inner enemy I have that's being portrayed by some kind of a face of a man not too far from here and his militia, so just to kind of vision this human beings in a place of pain and suffering and really just kind of intend for them or pray for them to get what they deserve, it automatically does the same thing to me inside of me. Because what I wish for them, it directly reflects to me. It's like, wow, I also want people to bless that for me, that I can get what I deserve and be have the possibility of being more connected to myself, the moment, be more precise, knowing where my actions, where I'm intending them to lead me. And this all connects really beautifully to the purpose of service which for me, I think really it's one of the main keys that I've been taking from surfing the dream spell calendar for 13 years and surfing the waves is really identifying these tones as the way the moon is communicating with me every day directly. This is how I take it. So the electric tone always made me feel so happy that there is this source of energy that I don't, it's not all on me to make sure that I'm the most energetic, the most clean, clear, everything that I would think, um, or a part of me, my perfectionist side or my spiritual side would think I'm supposed to aim to be that way. And it's more teaching me on the opposite flip side of it, like the spectral tone that comes alongside with the electric tone through the occult, that it's really about releasing and being free inside of my body to just do with what I can with the energy I have, and trust that when there'll be a moment that I will need a lot of energy to do something that I really want to do, so I'll have this energy. It's like we don't need to work so hard to be of service. We can just naturally kind of relax into ourselves as a process, as an ongoing process, and see and discover more and more what happens when I'm not acting from force, when I'm not pushing myself to or making an effort to, but what comes naturally to me, what brings me satisfaction and joy just by being this without even getting any recognition or anything for it. So so this is maybe from my side, I can say this is what I bless us in the electric moon to tap into, the possibility of being more liberated within ourselves to really act from what feels most synchronized with what we really are, who we really are, with our bodies, with our energy levels, with our emotions, with our values, with the way we perceive and aim our lives and the world to look like for our children, and that it can actually happen without effort, that it can happen just by being connected to the source and to the earth and to nature and to our own nature. So this is kind of my overlook on this whole conversation we've been having till now. And
Well,
I want, yeah, no,
well, I
no, you
was
go.
just, I wanted to just like, if there are people that are sort of newly discovering this Mayan spirituality as we described through natural time, 13 moon year, like this is the crux of why I am so invested in it, because it is a spiritual path that has instructions or inquiry that is very specific. So that's why it's calendar oriented spirituality. People have Buddhist practices and Christian practices and Islamic practices that are based, sometimes there's calendrics, but there's a lot of like based on a text that you refer to and you refer to. But the calendar, I love that I'm being given instructions for living day by day. And that it's really important to me that there be a directive to notice about being of service. It's not a directive to be of service. It's not a demand. It's just notice how you can best be of service. But that question is why I've stayed with the calendar, because I want to be oriented that way. I want to be shown. And it's really not just like, oh, one of the 13 times is about service. It's the month of service, like we move through in America, like Black History Month. And, it's part of the integral beginning is that we have a purpose. What is my purpose? What is my challenge? What is my service? Like, hold up. Let's make sure that's included, because think about it. If it was, what is my purpose? What is my challenge? The fifth tone, overtone, the fifth moon is how can I best empower myself? What if we just skip the service? Then we'd be in Western civilization. So it's really important to me that we have not just this moon, because the next moon, the moon of form or the self-existing moon is just sort of part two of how I can best be of service. It's like, what form will my service take? Let's anchor this in something. It's not just idea of light, but like, well, what am I going to be doing? And again, you're not deciding. You're not like, oh, the moon of, I got to figure out how I can best be of service. Jesus, they told me like, oh, but I've been doing all my errands and this came up. Like, no, it's just, you're just watching. You're living the answer to the question. You just take notes if you want. Oh, geez, someone asked me to do this. They really valued how good I am at this thing that they needed done. That might be for the whole year, right? Because this is a continuum for this whole year. How can I best be of service this year? It doesn't have to be for next year either. It could just be this year, I could best be of service this way. And like that's part of the upside of each moon. If I'm like kind of a shadow dweller and you hear me talk about like, well, the upside is you just get to be curious and childlike and like what, what's going to be behind that curtain? What's in that box that I haven't opened yet? We're going to discover through this moon how I get to best, how can I best be of service? I don't even know, but will be shown.
Hmm. That's awesome. That's beautiful. I'd really love to hear this conversation as someone that's learning the 13 moons. So I'm really happy we're producing it because it's
You're
really,
you're producing it, and I'm grateful.
yes, it's my pleasure, really. So maybe if I'll conclude for our listeners, um, I always like to connect the teaching to some kind of very practical tips that I can feel I can present very simply for people to kind of relate to energetically and maybe even practice specifically as I give them. But the idea is more about just getting the idea of how this energy is asking us to, what kind of actions could be in tune with this kind of energy that we're going through right now. So definitely, as we spoke, I like to say to look for the opportunities to be helpful to others. That really is the most natural way I find that I'm activated during electric moon and electric days, is that come opportunities for me to be of help to someone in any way. It could be even just a small gesture in the supermarket, seeing someone that has two products and I have 20, so telling them just here you can go ahead of me. It's just this remembering that there's this possibility to be helpful in the world. So searching for possibilities to give help to others and where they knock on our door and invite us to do so. And definitely, like we said, also on the other side, to look for possibilities to reach out our arm to be helped and to let other people be in service to us. It's equal as giving service to other people because one time we're in the receiving and one time we're in the giving. Even if when we accept ourselves to receive, we'll definitely be happy to the next moment afterwards to be in giving. So it goes both ways. And I also like to point out to recognize where we have opportunities to be excited and to react with excitement to something that's happening for us or in front of us, or just to act from our excitement. If I feel excited about something that I think about doing, to just enable myself to act upon this excitement, which is really the connection to the electricity, to the natural flow of energy, where we have joy, where we have passion, where we have excitement. Um, and if I take it more to the emotional level, so really to just to see where I think for me it connects more in observation to observe where we see that emotional processes that we were being challenged with in the past weeks, maybe months, they're starting to come together and form into something with a new shape, which we will talk about in the next meeting when we speak about the self-existing moon of form. So we'll be speaking a lot about form and formations and how energetic processes start to become structured in our lives, in this reality, and how that works. Yeah.
All
Anything
right.
you kind of feel like offering to our listeners going into this moon?
Yeah, I mean, I would just want to connect the word you were saying like to act or to be excited. I think that's just threaded, as you know, to the term to activate because Jose Arguelles left us these words. I mean, he was just such a funny computer. You know, he spit out these words for each of the tones, each of the moons. So activate, bond, and service. Like you could ruminate on that for the whole moon. Like what even? But I liked your description of like just know you're going to be activating. Like it is kind of go time, but it's not helter skelter. It's just like, yes, after maybe being flattened or run over a bit by the lunar moon or lost in the shadows, you will feel more power coming from a divine source. And I think what I think of it as a really potentially spiritually minded moon. Like at the beginning of it, I was like, I might need to like cut my, just turn off my phone for 28 days. Like that would be radical and so hard in our culture, our modern culture. But like that is one of the inclinations for the lunar moon, I mean, the electric moon to be turned into where am I with divinity? Because I think, one of my complaints about this non-Indigenous experience of screens is that there's so much power coming through the light of my, laptop and phone. My life has changed dramatically in 15 to 20 years where I'm like, what? The moon is full? So like kind of like trying to get closer to that, the natural sources consciously. That's one tip. Um, and then the other is, I mean, I think I was realizing listening to you that I come from the wound of being very hard on myself. I think it's sort of female or generational, but just like I don't have really great self-esteem. And so I like to teach, like, there's nothing for you to accomplish here. Just again, that's why I keep pushing, like, just ask the question and see what shows up. You can be a passive recipient to being of service to others. You just will have the impulse, but you can also have the confidence that you are necessary to be of service on we need your service on this planet, and that this is the moment when your higher power is going to show you your value. You have lots to give. So that would just be the other, like the more passive
Beautiful.
part of this moon is to just kind of there's a lot of action that starts coming when we get to overtone, rhythmic, and so on. And so I think it's really nice for people if they feel overexposed in the beginning of a wave spell to just slow down and do simpler practices. So that might be a tip.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it how we complement each other from our perspectives. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. So we'll be meeting up in another moon, another 28 days, to receive the input of the self-existing moon, which is I'm very curious about and very curious to talk to you about. So for our listeners, I thank you for being with us and remind you that you can always follow Lisa on her podcast Natural Time on Spotify, and keep following me on my YouTube channel for different uploads and interviews I have in English, but at the moment mostly in Hebrew, but more and more in English too. And thank you so much, Lisa. I really wish us an activating moon, a subtle activation. There's enough action going on, and we will see each other again soon.
Okay, I will just finish by reminding people, and again, it's not from a place of high self-esteem, but I have known for years that my best way of being of service this lifetime is to allow people to follow the calendar with me. So I want anyone who's tuning in and thinks you only get a download of information every 28 days to know that you can pretty much have it every day. So my work is at least 3 times a week through the podcast, but I mean, I think people know that, but I just want to emphasize that you really get to have your hand held if you're learning this or living through it, and you start to notice that once you kind of commit to a part of this path, it's very raw and awakened. So you want support and explanations and help. So I hope you can seek it.
Yes. So thank you so much again, and we will see each other again very soon.
I know. Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Alone.